Hello and welcome to the channel. This is a walk-around review of the StormTracker 2890. This is part of Troy-Bilt's two-stage line, and it is a very economical tracked snowblower. So let's take some time and go through this machine and see if it's the right snowblower for you. So let's get started.
Down in the dirt. Been real bad.
To start out with, let's talk about who owns this snowblower now. Over the last year and a half, Stanley Black & Decker has bought MTD. MTD owns the rights to Troy-Bilt, Craftsman, Cub Cadet, Columbia, Yard Machines, and a bunch of other names. So when I talk about this machine, sometimes I'll mention MTD, sometimes I'll say Troy-Bilt, sometimes I'll say Stanley Black & Decker. It's all today owned by Stanley Black & Decker. But you're still probably more familiar with the name MTD, so don't be surprised if I use it. It's also easier to say. All right, so let's start out with this snowblower up at the dash. Troy-Bilt has used this dash for quite a while. This dash is the latest version, meaning that it has a separate crank for the chute and a separate lever for the deflector. So I like this system a lot. It's much better than that old joystick that they had, and this one just works. On your dash here, you have, like I said, you have your chute crank, your deflector, your gear shift, two levers. One lever is for snow, the front auger and impeller. The other lever is for the drive. On a MTD, Craftsman, Cub Cadet, Troy-Bilt, it is opposite of some of the other snowblowers. So in other words, on this one, to drive it, put it in gear and make it go forward, you push down on this handle. To run the auger impeller, you push this handle. Some of the other ones are just the opposite of that. It does have single hand control, so if you put your hand on both levers and you let up on this one, everything stays. You keep, the impeller keeps running and you keep going forward. You can take your hand off of this and you can easily reach down and move your chute. You can move your deflector, and I don't recommend that you move the gear shift when you're moving. Well, I'll talk about that in the next video on the way the transmission works. So if you get in trouble or if you want to stop, just let go, everything stops. If you look a little closer, this snowblower has red handles. These red handles mean that it does have hand warmers, and the switch to turn them on and off is down here. I like the Troy-Bilt hand warmers. They're nice and warm. There's also a little spot here to hold a couple extra shear pins, and it's nice to have a set of spare shear pins sitting around just in case you happen to hit something and break a shear pin. This machine is also has power steering. So under each handle there's a lever. If you pull up on this lever, it releases the track on this side, which allows the machine to turn under its own power. If you ever have to move this machine, this one will freewheel. Some of the other track drive machines, especially the hydrostats, they can be really hard to move if the engine's not running. With this one, You can move it if you just push on it. The easy way to do it is pull up on both triggers. That releases the transmission, and then you can roll it back and forth. I like the handle height on these. It's a little bit lower, an inch or so, than some of the other brands. So it works good for people in the 5'2" to 6 foot range very well. The dash is made of a polymer. It doesn't break, it doesn't wear out. You can break it. I've seen a few of them that come from the shipper where somebody's hit the box with a forklift and cracked this, but Troy-Bilt's always been really good at getting that replaced right away. The snowblower does have 2 speeds in reverse and 6 speeds forward. It's real easy to move. You can even move this one without the engine running. When you move it forward, there's a spring that helps you move it forward, and when you pull it back, just slide it over and pull it back to the gear that you want it in. It does not have a neutral on it because as long as the drive handle is up, the system is in neutral. How strong is a poly chute on a Troy-Bilt? Let's find out. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the poly chute. If you've noticed, a lot of manufacturers have switched over to metal chutes in the last couple of years. There's 2 reasons for that. Number one, the large heavy-duty snowblowers need a large, wide, long chute to be able to effectively get the snow out and throw it a long way. Well, the metal is the easiest to do. Instead of having to come up with all new molds and stuff for the chutes, they just opted to go with metal. The Toro is one of the ones that has switched to the metal chutes on the large machines just because of that. The other thing is a marketing ploy. The internet has convinced everybody that metal chutes are better. Why? Because years and years ago, back in the mid 2000s, say 2004 to 2007, 2010, a lot of the manufacturers used a poly chute that attached down here at the bottom and then used a metal screw to move it. Well, the clips down here weren't that strong, and you could actually pop that chute off the snowblower. Also, the materials that they were using weren't quite as refined as what they're using today, so the chute sometimes would break or crack, and they could be pretty aggravating. Eventually, companies like Troy-Bilt came up with this hanging chute, and they changed the polymers. So this hanging chute, there's no connection down here. It just sits down onto a sleeve. This all up here is a sealed gear case, so no moisture or snow or ice can get inside of it. So it works in all temperatures. The poly itself is designed to handle sub-zero temperatures without any problems. I have a Troy-Bilt 2860, which is basically the same machine with different engine and wheels, that I've used in minus 26 temperatures, and I've never had any problems with these chutes. So about the only way you're going to break one of these chutes today is if you drop your snowblower out the back of your pickup going down the highway. A couple advantages of this long poly chute is, number one, it holds the snow so that it throws it further and gives you more. It doesn't spray back in your face like the old ones used to do. Number two, it doesn't scratch or rust. If you have gravel driveways and stuff like that, eventually the inside of your metal chute is going to get all chipped and pitted, and depending on how much gravel you run in it, you could actually take all of the coating off the inside of the metal chute. These don't do that. These stay smooth. I've seen chutes that have had hundreds and hundreds of hours on them, and the inside is still just as smooth as the day that they bought it. So one big improvement that Troy-Bilt made years ago is, let's see if I can make sure you guys can see it. There we go. Down here, this piece, all the old MTD snowblowers, I'm talking 20 years ago, they would last and last and last. The snowblowers would last, sometimes the engines didn't, but the snowblowers would last. But all of them would start to get a hole right here in the side of the impeller. In other words, you put enough gravel through them, eventually you're going to wear a hole in the side there. Well, Troy-Bilt came along and they saw that problem, so they changed it to this plastic piece here. This plastic piece is a lot thicker. I have not, I'm trying to think when they did that, probably, let's say 2010. I have not seen one yet that has had any wear or any holes in here. So they got that fixed. The chute itself, like I mentioned talking about the dash, uses a single crank, and it's a fast crank, like 2 turns to go all the way from one side to the other. It stays in place. It doesn't want to walk around on you. Some snowblowers, when you go to use them, the chute will want to move if there's a lot of snow going through it. These don't. They stay exactly where you want them. The deflector out here on the end is controlled by 2 cables, 2 sheathed cables, and I don't see any problems with those either. They don't freeze. They're designed so that the snow can't run into them, and the moisture can't get inside of them and freeze them up. Never really had a problem. If you normally use this on normal or light snow, it works really great. If you get a heavy snow, sometimes this will want to ride up on you, and that tension is set right here. So if you're running heavy snow and it keeps wanting to come up on you, just tighten this down a 1/8 of a turn or so, and your deflector will stay put. That's about the only thing to really deal with on these chutes. A nice feature about them over a metal chute is if something gets a little loose, the metal chutes with the metal piece here, they'll sit there and rattle and sound like a tin can with BBs in it. These polys, they don't do that. So, but there's no weight down here. All the weight is up here. It's called a hanging chute, so you won't have any problems with them. To recap, if you go out on the internet, there's always that one guy who posts on every forum and every website that tells you that poly is junk. Well, I'm going to tell you that he doesn't know everything. I've been quite happy with these over the years, and I have no problems recommending this Troy-Bilt to you with the poly chute. All right, moving on to the front end. By the way, the Troy-Bilt snowblowers, the back idler wheel is far enough forward so that you can grab the housing, lift up on it, and set the unit back on its handles if you want to work on the front end. You don't have to work on it on the ground if you don't want to. So Troy-Bilt snowblowers are designed as residential snowblowers. They'll have a little thinner metal on the housing and the impeller area than you would if you bought a commercial unit. The commercial units, the metal is probably twice as thick on some of them. It's hard to figure this all out anymore because some companies use a thicker rolled steel, other companies use a high tensile steel. So even though the metal looks thin, it's still a strong steel. And they don't really talk about it. They don't explain that process. But years ago, we used to have problems with these panels here on the side. They would, over time, they would cave in and start rubbing against the augers and stuff like that. Or the welds would come loose on them and they would flap around. We don't have that problem today. They use more welds. They use better quality control, so everything fits well. And companies like Troy-Bilt have gone to molding or stamping these side panels to make them nice and strong. So if you notice here, it's not so much decorative as it is to help strengthen the machine. It's got an edge out here that helps pull the snow in just a little bit, so your skid shoe doesn't rub up against if you got really deep snow you're working in, doesn't rub up against the side there as much. These two bolts here hold the bearings in for the auger, which we'll get to in a second. Troy-Bilt uses a poly skid shoe, and they've had this poly skid shoe around for a long time. Talking about structural, this is nice because it's long, and the two bolts, it helps hold this bottom, make this bottom nice and stiff. So it works well from a residential standpoint. These poly shoes also wear very well. You can use them on your patio pavers. You can use them on decks. They won't scratch your deck. If you use them on your normal sidewalks and driveways, they last a long time. They are reversible, and they're not that expensive if you ever do wear one out. They use this one skid shoe for all their snowblowers. So they got different slots on them, so you could adjust them around if you want. MTD does make, or MTD now Black & Decker, does make another skid shoe that is tougher than this one. If you've got a lot of sidewalk to use and you're wearing these skid shoes out every 2 years or so, they have a skid shoe that's the same dimensions on the Cub Cadets, and they're blue. That's a harder polymer, and those will fit on this machine if you ever want to go that way. It does have holes for drift cutters if you need to install them. You get really deep drifts, you know. If your driveway gets a 4-foot drift every time it snows, drift cutters help cut and keep that from collapsing on you when you're cutting through. You can buy those, they're optional. You can find them on the Troy-Bilt website. Going around to the back a little bit, and it's a little dark, but you can see it. This back housing also has stampings in it to keep it from vibrating. Harmonic, it's called harmonic noise. Engines make a vibration, and at certain RPMs they can cause big pieces of metal like this to vibrate. By putting these in here, it helps strengthen the housing, and it keeps those vibrations from happening. This is your chute clearing tool. It's required by the feds that you have to include these with the machine. If you ever get your impeller auger system plugged up, do not stick your hands in there. Use this tool to clean it out. The whole system can kind of get a pressure on it, so that when you reach in and go to pull snow out or pull an obstruction, you know, like a newspaper or something like that, the whole system can spring. And if you're unlucky enough, you can have your finger down in here and the auger can turn and it'll cut your fingers or take them off. A lot of old guys running around didn't know that, and they have 2, 3, or 4 fingers missing. So be really cautious if you got a plug. Use that tool to clear things out with. All right, moving around. This front lip here on Troy-Bilts is not a rolled edge, but it's smooth, and I can pick it up without it bothering my fingers. You might want to put a pair of gloves on if you ever want to lift your machine up and move the front end around. This snowblower is a 28-inch wide one. Troy-Bilt makes 24, 26, 28. They have a 30. I don't think they have the 34 anymore. But these housings are tall housings. They're not like your old snowblower where your housing is only like 12 or 14 inches high. These 21-inch housings will allow you to work through drifts. It'll allow you to work through the snowplow drift out the end of your driveway without the snow rolling over the backside of them and getting caught in the wheels, or in this case the tracks. All right, let's get inside the front end here. Troy-Bilt uses a system of closed flight augers, a gearbox, and an impeller to throw the snow. Closed flight augers work a little bit differently than the augers that you see on other brands. The other brands, there's just a ribbon here and outside of a screw. Those type of systems, they grab the snow and move it towards the end, but they also aerate the snow a little so that it's easier to throw. The Troy-Bilt's auger flights don't do as good a job of aerating the snow, but for the capacity of the machine and for a homeowner, that's not an issue really. It's just a technical thing. I can talk more about that later on, or if you go watch some of my older videos, I spend a lot of time talking about the differences between the two. Troy-Bilt uses shear pins on each auger flight, and if you notice, they're all just a little bit loose. That's by design. So by having just a little bit of play in them, these always stay rust free. There's a metal shaft that runs all the way through this machine on these. And you don't need to grease these or anything like that because they have that little slop in them. If you hit something like a corner of a landscape bed, piece of 2x4, your kid's toys, your dog's favorite shoe, that type of stuff, you will bust these shear pins because they are made to break so you don't tear up your gearbox. On this model, the 28-inch 2-stage, you probably, unless you hit something specifically, you'll never bust one of these shear pins. The 2860 that I've had around here for years, I've never broken a shear pin on that because I knew where all my landscape beds was and always kept my yards clean. Even out clearing turf, an area of the grass for the dogs, never had a problem with breaking these. The 3-stage machines, on the other hand, which this is not, this is a 2-stage, the 3-stage machines have a habit of breaking the shear pin that on the 3rd stages. Just because you try to put too much snow through them and the shear pin can't handle it. But they use the same shear pin on everything, so it's a nice, and the garbage truck's coming through. How does this handle heavy wet snow? On your residential driveway, this handles heavy wet snow just fine. If you get snow that you can pack in a snowball, this will do just great. If you get slush, and by slush I mean you get 3-4 inches of stuff that you take and stomp your foot and it splashes, this snowblower is not going to do that well. It'll move it, but it will probably only throw it out the chute 5-10 feet at the most. Does that make it a machine that you don't want? Well, look at the cost. This snowblower costs half as much as another tracked snowblower that can handle that slush. So it's actually a very good value. I think the retail right now is about $17.99. You'll have to check, the Troy-Bilt website to get the most accurate one. So in general, you're going to like this snowblower. One thing that they have done with this snowblower that you don't see on a lot of the other MTD built machines is it has teeth in the auger flights now. So if you get that snow, that heavy wet snow, and then the cold front that comes behind it, like we typically get here in the Midwest, and the snow all freezes up on you and you don't get the job done, these teeth work really well at chewing through that hard snow, and so you can move it. And with the tracks, it gives you a lot of extra traction so you can push through that hard stuff. Moving on, this gearbox, again, the internet amplifies things that typically really aren't a problem. You get one guy or two guys that will say something, and then it gets pushed to every other site, and pretty soon it seems like it's a major problem. Well, this gear case is an aluminum cased bevel gear system, and it uses hardened steel gears inside. It is sealed. We did have problems with the MTD gear cases years ago because this gasket used to be a paper gasket, and they would leak and the grease would run out of them, and then they'd run out of lubrication and fail. I actually haven't seen one of those since maybe 2007 or so, where they've failed. Again, this is a residential snowblower, so your two-car driveway, 100-foot long sidewalks, backyard, this machine is going to last you 20 years. If you think you want to make money with this and go do 25 or 30 driveways every single time it snows, well, you're going to wear them out. You're going to wear them out faster than the ones that cost twice as much. So just be aware of that. As a homeowner, this is a really good deal. It'll last you a long time. This is a full, like I said before, this is a full width shaft in here, so you don't get that vibrating up and down that you can. If you see a machine that has a brace up in here, a lot of times the gearbox shaft only comes back to here, and the augers themselves are hollow inside, and there'll be another shaft back here. Those are the ones that have to have the brace, otherwise you can get some vibration up and down. You'll bust the Here goes the other garbage truck. We have one for recycling and one for regular garbage. Where was I at? These plastic spacers in here, they don't break. If you hit something really hard with this, you're not going to bend this shaft. You're going to bust these shear pins. So make for sure you put actual MTD shear pins in. In other words, they can say Troy-Bilt on them, they can say Cub Cadet, they can say Yard Machines, they can say Arnold. Arnold is their parts division. And eventually they're probably going to say Black & Decker, Stanley Black & Decker too. So make sure you replace them with the actual shear pin that's intended for these. If you put a bolt in here, bolts are too strong, and that's when you start breaking stuff. Let's go down and look at the scraper bar. Scraper bars on snowblowers are not really designed to run right on the pavement. They're designed to protect this bottom housing from wear in case you do run them on the pavement. They do, if you run it, you always want to have about 1/8 of an inch of gap underneath these. And by the way, this Troy-Bilt came from the factory with the 1/8 inch gap built into it already. A lot of them you have to readjust it before you go do it. So this, by having that 1/8 inch gap, it doesn't, the snowblower doesn't catch on concrete cracks and stuff like that, and it doesn't pick up very much gravel when you're doing your gravel driveway. If you have a driveway that has a lot of small loose gravel to it, you may want to increase this gap between here and the ground to 3/8 or even 1/2 inch if you got a lot of soft gravel that you're working with. So here in the Midwest, typically we will get freezing weather, we'll get a little rain, a little moisture, and our gravel driveways will get frozen right away. It's not a problem. If you live south of here, you know, say down in the Carolinas or Virginias, places like that, a lot of times you don't get that hard freeze on the ground, so your gravel driveways will be a little softer. So that's when you want to put a bigger gap in here. These are replaceable if you do wear them out. They're easily replaceable. This one has 4 bolts along the bottom and then 1 bolt here on the side, on each side. So, and they're not expensive. Let's go all the way back in and look at the impeller. Troy-Bilt has standardized on a 3-blade impeller. It has 3 paddles on it. The paddles are flat and angled, so they do throw the snow pretty well out the housing. Yeah, they throw the snow well out of the housing. I never see a Troy-Bilt where this all gets caked up with snow, even the heavy wet stuff. They do have reinforcements welded here all the way on the back side of the paddle to keep them, in case you get something in here, and it keeps them from getting bent up. This is longer than what it used to be, so it now comes all the way up here to the top. They used to be only down to about this high. So they continually work on these machines and make them better as years go on. This backside is rounded over, and that's so snow doesn't get in the back here and freeze up on you. It does have a weep hole. I don't know if you can see it or not. There's a hole down here in the back of the impeller. What that's for is when you get done blowing snow, a lot of times you'll have snow sticking inside of these housings, and that hole allows that water to drain out of there so it doesn't freeze up and lock up your impeller. All right, more bearings. This is a residential machine, so there's bushings in here instead of ball bearings. You really don't want ball bearings in here because unless it's completely sealed and lubricated because of all the moisture that's in here. So, but this is, these bushings do last a long time. I don't see, you probably never have to replace one as long as you own the snowblower. Any questions on the front? Probably more information you need to know, right? Let me tip it back down and I'll talk about one more thing. All right, black on black on a camera is hard to see. So take my word for it if you can't see this down here. This is a nice size discharge. It's a lot bigger than it used to be. So this machine can get the snow through, get it through this choke point and get it out the chute real nice. It's all smooth in here. There's no lips or anything like that, so this will process the snow through the machine and out the chute without it catching. If you do get in a situation where you're trying to move slush, a lot of times snow blowers won't throw it all the way up the chute. It'll throw and get about this far and then drop out. So just be aware of the fact that hardly any machine handles slush really well, and that's what you're going to get. This cover right here covers the belts. One belt drives the transmission, another belt drives the impeller. That is open inside, but snow and ice doesn't get in there, and it doesn't cause any problems with slippage or anything like that. Put together another video on the track system and what it looks like inside the transmission. I'll post that in the next day or so. So I go into great detail on how the track drive works. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on how the track drive works here, other than the fact that it is a 3-point drive, which is pretty common nowadays. The benefits of a 3-point drive is all of your mechanics are up here on the top, so they're not down in the snow. It gives you more shock resistance for the whole system, so they last longer. The Troy-Bilt system here is it's got poly idler wheels. It does have a poly tensioner in it, so you don't have to adjust these tracks ever. And it has sliders on the bottom there to keep everything nice and flat for you. This puts a lot of track on the ground compared to some of the other ones. I won't name names, but the ones that only have the drive wheel back here and then one idler wheel up front don't have near as much track on the ground as what this one does. You adjust the height of the snowblower with this lever. You pull out on it and then you can raise it up. It has 4 different positions. Transport height, working out in areas where you don't need to clear it all the way down to the ground, like getting a path out to your feed shed on the ground. And then there's one more position which we basically call dig-in mode. What happens is the back of the front of the track is actually lifted up, so all your weight is on the back corner and the front. So that gives you the most traction. If you got some real sticky, heavy snow, some stuff that's frozen, that gives you the best traction. The only problem that I like track machines a lot. They're a lot of fun. I like to be able to go anywhere I want to. They'll handle any driveway slope. You won't have any problems going up and down any driveway. These models that have the different steps, there's 2 things that you can't do with them. Number one, you can't go up steps. In other words, there's one other machine out there on the market where you can actually tip the front end way up and you can actually drive up and put this on your porch. You can't do that with these. You have to use ramps. The other thing that it's not a problem, but it's something that it took me a while to realize. These don't have a float mode. So in other words, when they're level on the ground, they're level on the ground. If you have in areas that have a lot of dips and bumps, up and down, these track drives with the lever control on them, they don't have that float position. It's nice because it keeps the front end locked down on the ground, but sometimes you would like to have a float position. It's not a don't buy type of a deal. I'm probably the only one that would ever bring that up and talk about floating your front bucket. Nobody else probably will talk about that. Right, going back to actually using this in snow, you can adjust your chute however you want it to go, forward, back, up and down. Sometimes you want the snow to go as far away from your driveway as possible. Sometimes you want the snow to go right next to it. If you're in a position where you can't get your snow as close to the snowblower as you want, angle the chute so it blows in front of you, and that way you can get your snow right there where you want it. There are a few snowblowers out there with double jointed deflectors out on the top that'll put the snow right next to you, but very few of them. These is just as easy to take and turn your your chute at an angle and then put your deflector all the way down. Capacity wise, these snowblowers you won't have any problems with. These snowblowers can easily handle 8, 10, 12 inches of snow at a good pace. If you get more snow than that, or if your snow gets really heavy, being a homeowner machine, it doesn't have that huge capacity of the machines that cost twice as much as this. So the easy thing to remember is if you're walking behind your unit and you start to see snow piling up, or you can see it pushing out, just put your machine in a slower gear. Drop it down a gear or two and allow it to work through that. Also on this machine, since it's a track drive, if the snow is building up in front of you and it doesn't seem like it's coming out of the chute very well, stop, back up a couple feet, and check your shear pins, because you may have 1 or 2 shear pins broken. If those augers aren't spinning, the snow can't get through the machine. You just end up with a plow instead. On a wheeled machine, if the front end wants to ride up on you, it's the same situation. Either slow down, if the front end keeps wanting to ride up on you, slow down, take a half swath, something like that, and also stop and check and see if you've got a broken shear pin. Good general rule of thumb. All right, we got 2 things left to talk about. Engine and the cables. Let's talk about the cables first. A lot of companies use a sheath cable for everything. Sometimes the wires inside are a solid rod. Sometimes some use flexible. Depends on what they're doing with it. If you're pushing and pulling with the cable, the inside is going to be a solid wire. If you're just pulling, then it may be a flexible wire. Troy-Bilt has 3 cables back here, and they're only used for a pulling application. So if you pull a trigger to turn your machine, this wire, you pull that wire gets tension on it, and that's what makes it turn. The same way with this cable here for the shifter. Since it's spring loaded, there's always tension on this cable. So you don't need a sheathed solid cable to control. This cable is the same size as what's inside of one of these sheathed cables. So you'll hear guys complain, well, cheap cables, they're going to break. Well, no, they're not. They're the same thing as what's inside. These are also stranded cables inside of here, so they're flexible. They don't get stiff and cause you problems. And I do need to talk about how to adjust. Before we get to the engine, let's move around to the back here. Like I said, there's 3 cables here that we've been talking about. The left and right cable handle the power steering. When you pull on your trigger, it pulls on this cable here, which releases the dogs on the planetary gear inside the transmission. You don't know what I'm talking about, do you? in the next video, you'll learn what a planetary is. These don't stretch, but sometimes they don't get out of adjustment. Right? They do get out of adjustment. After 5-10 years or so, these may get sloppy enough so that when you pull your trigger, it won't turn. All you have to do is adjust this pulley here to give you a little more tension. You want them a little bit of slack, but you don't want to be able to take them and twist them over. So when you pull on your trigger, you want to feel the tension and feel it release. To adjust this tension, all you have to do is loosen these two bolts here and then push this down until you get the tension, tighten them back up. Same way with the shifter cable. If you have problems with it not going into the same gear or into the number on your gear shift lever up here on top, in other words, say it will no longer go into second, it's third or something like that. This cable may be loose. That adjustment is here. Just loosen this bolt up and move this up or down to give you that tension. The easy way to do that is have it all the way down into high, into the 6th gear. You'll see there's it loosens up a little bit as soon as, and you can adjust it there so it gives you your maximum speed. So if it's loose, you're in maximum speed. So little tweakers there. Again, they don't break these cables. I've seen some guys get them caught and they'll break them. Also the same way with the triggers. These are good poly triggers. Everybody uses a trigger something along these lines, and sometimes you'll catch one on your coat or on your fence or chain link fence or something like that, and you'll break one, but you're not going to wear them out. All right, one last thing, engine. This snowblower uses the Troy-Bilt 272cc overhead valve engine. It's been around a while. It's a good engine, never gives us any problems. The other snowblower that I have around here, the 2860, has the 252cc, I think it is, 252. The manufacturers won't use horsepower anymore because of legal and lawsuits saying, well, your power isn't exactly what you're advertising, all that type of stuff. So anyway, they've just gone to CCs. But a 250cc engine is approximately 8 horse. This 272cc engine is approximately 9 horse. And then you get up to the 300cc engines, those are approximately 10 horse. So 9 horse on a 28-inch machine is a very good power to size ratio. If you look at all the competition in the 28-inch size, the homeowner market, typically a 28-inch machine will have about a 250cc-ish motor on it. So that gives you plenty of power here for most of your average homeowners. And when I say average homeowner, I mean you get 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 inches of snow. Living here in the Midwest, I live north, just a little bit north of Interstate 80. I'm right in that typical average snowfall. You go over to Chicago, they typically average in that 30, though they can get as much as 60 inches. Go out to Des Moines, go out to Omaha, go further west, it's still about the same. Go from here into Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, again, it's about the same. If you get further north, like up into New York State, Massachusetts, stuff like that, you get more snow. Get up into northern Michigan, you can get as much as 120 inches of snow. Boston area, the average snowfall isn't that much, but you get those nor'easters, those 20, 24 inch snowfalls that are heavy wet snow. Then you want to go to a larger engine. The other manufacturers typically will put this 270 to 300 cc range on the homeowner stuff, and they go up to 420 cc's on the commercial machines. All I'm trying to say is this is a good size engine for this snowblower. You won't complain about the power, you won't complain, and you also won't complain about the fuel economy. These are good fuel efficient machines. Oil dipstick, full length dipstick, so you can check your oil. And it has the two little holes on the bottom, so it's easy to see where your oil is at. I recommend that you go ahead and change your oil after the first 5 hours. Put a full synthetic in it, and then you don't have to worry about changing it. Manufacturers like you to change it every year. Personally, I run Mobil 1, so I can go much longer than a year without changing the oil in them. Because in reality, you're maybe going to put 10, 20, 30 hours a year max on these engines, so the oil will last. Poly gas tank, so it doesn't rust. You don't have to worry about rust flakes and all that type of stuff inside. It's a ratcheting type, and it does come loose easy. You don't have to press down on it or anything. There's no screen in this, because all your new gas cans have a flashback screen in them, so all the big chunks are filtered out. So you can look down in here and you can see how much fuel is in it. And this one does have some. I haven't put any in yet, so that's nice. Came in the box with some gas in it. That never happens. This has both pull start and electric start. All you have to do is take your 110 volt lawn and garden extension cord, plug the end in here, push your button, and run your electric starter. I hardly ever use the electric starter on snowblower engines. If you start them correctly, you really don't have any problems with them. You can start them just by pulling the handle. These do have a compression release when you start them, so they don't jerk your hands back. All engines have that nowadays, all these small engines. It's nothing new. So I don't know, I think this will start. When you get the snowblower, there's 4 things that you need to do to start it. Troy-Bilt snowblowers do not have a fuel shutoff valve. They have a stop switch on the throttle, but they don't have an actual valve that closes the gas line to the carburetor. Why? Because the float and the needle valve inside the carburetors are designed so that they don't leak. So as long as you turn the throttle to stop on these, you won't have any problems with gas running out of the gas tank and through the carburetor and down into the engine. It just doesn't happen with these. To start these machines, make sure you have some fuel in your snowblower. You can use, I'm sure this one has True Fuel in it or something along those lines, just because True Fuel is good for 2 years of storage. These machines are designed to run on 87 octane E10 or less fuel. Don't put E15 in these. E15 will give you a problem. So a lot of gas stations now, the first 2 or 3 grades on them is all E15. Don't use that gas. If you have to spend the extra money to get E10 or non-ethanol gas, you're going to have to spend the money on it. These don't take a lot of fuel. 2 gallons will probably get you through the whole winter, just so you know. So to start the machine, you take your throttle, move it off of stop. I generally run it all the way over. Make for sure that your safety key is pushed all the way in. If you notice, this is the primer. You have to press this 2 to 4 times when you go to start your machine. If you notice, this one has a little hole in the top of it. Put your thumb over that hole and then press it 3 or 4 times. If you've got a gloved hand, you might want to take your glove off, because sometimes that will cause this not to seal up tight. So use your finger, pump it 3 or 4 times. Choke up here, all the way this way is full open, all the way this way is full closed. When you go to start it the first time, have it all the way on full closed. As soon as it fires, take and start moving this a step at a time. Snowblower carburetors don't have electronic air fuel mixtures on them, so depending on the temperature, you may not be able to open your throttle or your choke all the way. That's normal. That's just the way these snowblower engines work. So sometimes when it's really, really cold out, you can only bring it back one notch, or the engine will die. So I don't know, let's give this a try. I did everything I'm supposed to. Let's see if it fires. One more time. So notice it tried to start. I'm going to hit this one 3 more pumps. You know why it's not starting? Because I had it tipped upside down. Now, let's try this. The reason it didn't start first pull the way I expected it to was because I had it tipped back on its back, so the fuel had dripped out of the carburetor. So anyway, starts right up. Next time I go to use it, it'll fire right up, no problems. If you notice, you can adjust your throttle. Always run your snowblower at full RPM. That way it throws snow the correct way. If you think you want to stop for some reason and you're way out at the end of the driveway and you don't want to turn the machine off, if you notice, these do have a throttle. Okay, I think I've covered everything on this machine. Hopefully this information will let you decide if this Troy-Bilt StormTracker 2890 is the right snowblower for you. I like the machine. It's a good homeowner machine. I'd have no problems buying one if I had a driveway with a nice steep slope on it. My sister lives up on the bluffs here in Clinton, and she's always worried about snowblowers not being able to get up her driveway. We may just have to bring this one over there to keep her happy this year. I like the value of this machine. It's a good, solid residential unit. Troy-Bilt over time has taken the time and re-engineered the little trouble areas of their snowblowers, so that I don't expect this snowblower to give you any issues for the next 10, 15, even 20 years. It's not a commercial machine. If you're going to go out and this is plenty good to do your driveway, your grandma's driveway, and maybe your uncle's driveway. I have no problems with that, using it for 2 or 3 driveways all the time. But if you expect to make money with this, if you expect to go out and do 10, 20, 30 driveways all the time and complain about this machine not lasting you 20 years, well, that's your fault. Because it's not going to you're going to have to do some maintenance to it. I'm not saying the machine won't last, you're just going to have to do some maintenance to it. I especially like the price for a track snowblower. This is half the price of most of the other track drive systems out there on the market right now. I think the only other track snowblower that's in this price range is the Aaron's Compact 24. Everything else is $3,000 and higher. All right, any questions? Feel free to leave questions or comments in the comments section down below. If you like this video, please like it. And if you'd like to see the next video on the inside of the transmission, or if you'd like to see other videos like this, please subscribe. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Down